For the next 45 minutes, we have a panel discussion with Geode committers. Anthony is going to be the panel moderator. So I'm going to just let them introduce themselves and go for it. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Geode panel discussion. My name is Anthony Baker, and I'm up here with a group of Geode committers. We're here to answer your questions today. We are going to hit a bunch of topics and give you a better understanding and appreciation for the magic that Geode brings to distributed data. And I hope you brought a lot of questions today because this session is for you. The more questions you ask, the more interactive this discussion will be. And I hope we have a great conversation because I want you to leave with a sense of participation and engagement in the Geode community. So, speaking of the Geode community, how many of you are members of that Geode community? Let's see some hands. Who's a member? Anyone done a pull request, bug report, email? All right. Okay, so for everyone who didn't raise their hands, this was a trick question. If you're here today, you're part of the Geode community. So thank you. All right. I also want you to realize and appreciate that the Geode community is an open forum. We accept contributions of all kinds, whether it's pull requests, bug reports, emails, blog postings, YouTube videos of your cool application you wrote on Geode, documentation updates, website refreshes. If you are interested in contributing, we want to help you. And the Apache Foundation defines a journey towards contributing and becoming a committer. I'm really excited. We just voted in 12 new committers earlier this month. And I'd love to have you join our ranks as well. So if you're interested, Jags posted some links earlier, but go check out our website, visit the community page, sign up for the email list, and get started. We'd love to help you. So with that said, let's do some introductions. So as I said, my name's Anthony Baker. I've been working on the code base for over 6 years now. I'm a member of the Apache Software Foundation. I'm a Geode committer and PMC member. My day job, I work at Pivotal as an engineering director, and I get to work with a lot of amazing, smart people. My favorite feature in Geode is its group membership and failure detection algorithms. I like those because whenever there's a failure, it fences off unresponsive members to maintain reliability and consistency. And that means I can just write an application and it'll keep working even in the case of transient failures. So that's who I am. Karen.
Hi. You already saw me once. I'm Karen. I am a Geode committer and member of the PMC. And for my day job, I work for Pivotal. I am a documentation expert. So I know a little bit about an awful lot of things inside of Geode. If I have to choose a favorite feature of Geode, I choose the WAN distribution feature because it means that you can use Geode to do an awful lot of totally cool things, which is also a plug for a talk coming up this coming session about the WAN distribution feature.
Hey, I'm Jianxia. I'm a Geode committer. I'm a PMC member. And the favorite feature I like in Geode is actually PDX. I'm not talking about the PDX airport. It's actually a portable data exchange. It's a feature that Geode offers for data serialization and deserialization. So with PDX, we can serialize and deserialize the data in a more efficient way. And also, if you want a particular field of the serialized data with PDX, you can just serialize this data without deserializing the whole domain object, which is very convenient for us to access the data. And also, we can mix the versions of the serialized data if we want to add a new field or remove field to the domain object. PDX allows you to do that. Okay, thanks.
All right, and I'm Dan Smith. I'm also a committer and PMC member and Pivotal employee. I've been working on GemFire, well, Geode, for about 11 years now, actually. And my favorite part is actually the rebalancing. One, because I got a chance to work on it, and two, I think it's actually really interesting. We let you co-locate data the way that you say, and then we have to figure out how to distribute that evenly. So it's kind of an interesting optimization problem, and also a problem of switching around who owns the data while the system's live. And if it's working right, you don't have to think too much about it. So, yeah.
Right. Hi, everyone. My name is Swapnil. I am also a committer and a PMC member, and have been working on this code base for 11 years. The one feature I like the most, partly because I also implemented is transactions. Like it because of the number of optimizations we were able to put in it. So the way we do basically eager or optimized. We are able to put in the 1.5 phase commit in there for you, and the way we've optimized the transaction for better read throughput basically in your transactional scenario. So all of those make it my favorite feature.
Thanks, Swapnil. I'm a little worried about your status on the edge of the stage there.
Yes.
I don't want to get you evicted. So if you could just step this way. Thanks. So for our first question, I've got a question already prepared. Then we'll open it up for audience questions. But let's start in reverse order. So tell us about a feature that you've either been working on or been learning about, something that's going on in Geode.
Sure. So we are working towards bringing in support for Java 11. Given that it is going to release anytime, hopefully at the end of this month. So we're still planning on compiling Geode with 8, but you should be able to run it on 11 as well. So that's coming.
What kind of changes do you see needing to be made because of the Java 11 support?
So right off the bat, so when you are using gfish to start up your server, because of the way I guess we depends on tools.jar to spin up the process in a background thread. It didn't really work out of the gate with the new JDKs. The server process just wasn't able to start up. So it's just little things like that we've had to go back and fix and ensure that we're able to run without a problem on Java 11.
Cool, thanks. Dan, what about you?
Well, one of the things I got a chance to work on recently is actually our Lucene integration. So we actually, you can add a Lucene index on top of your data just by another gfish command. And what we're doing then is we're actually storing Lucene index co-located with your data inside of Geode. So if you want to do all this cool text search stuff like find neighboring words or whatever, you can do that right within Geode, and you don't have to stand up a separate Solr cluster or anything like that, and you get all the availability and durability and speed that Geode gives you for those indexes.
Awesome. So the Lucene text search feature is built on top of the high availability in Geode then?
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Go ahead, Jianxia.
I'm going to talk about the feature of Odbc Connector. So as a typical use case for Geode is use Geode as a front-end cache for database. So typically we use a cache writer, cache loader, and a sync event listener to load and sync data between the Geode and the backend database. So with this new feature, Odbc Connector, so developer don't have to write this implementation for this interfaces. You can just issue some gfish command to establish Odbc connection to the database, and also write gfish command to just create a mapping between the database table and the Geode region. And after that, you can just use the region put and get to sync the database and Geode. That's very convenient and still experimental. Okay.
Awesome, thank you. Karen?
A relatively new feature in Geode is the integrated security management implemented with your own security manager interface. It's kind of neat because you're going to be able to do your authentication and authorization. And two aspects of it are important and new and wondrous. One is that it is role-based, which means that you can assign specific roles to your different people who would be interacting with Geode. So for example, your operators can be limited in reading data from your regions, while your developers can be prevented from stopping all your locators, if you want. The second part of it, that's really cool. Sorry. The second part of it that's really cool, has slipped my mind, is that it's integrated with all the components. So it used to be, before the security manager interface was brought in, that each individual component did authentication and its own separate authorization in its own separate way, but now they all use the same exact way in the security manager. Okay, so nice, integrated.
Awesome. Thanks, Karen. All right. So you've been listening to talks for a few hours now, and I'm hoping you have some questions stored up for us. We're not going to be able to show you any code, but we can probably approximate this. So go ahead. We don't have an extra mic, but if you can raise your hand, shout it out loud. I'll repeat it for the audience.
So I found where if I'm putting data in a cache during hydration, and the data format changes, which it shouldn't, but in dev, sometimes it does, I can't deserialize the row that just went in there. Do you have any best practices surrounding like a format change? Obviously the data the format should never have changed when it went in there, but if I have a row in a cache and it can't deserialize with my PDX serializer, do you have any best practices surrounding that?
Okay, so let me see if I've got this. The question is about data serialization. GemFire stores objects in a cache, so those objects need some form of serialization. And what happens when that serialization format changes, either through PDX supported serialization or through maybe serialization changes that aren't compatible, like data type changes. Is that right?
Yeah, like one instance was in dev. We were hydrating from a JSON service, a service that gave us JSON, and the structure changed. I couldn't tell that immediately. GemFire didn't say anything until I went to deserialize it. And then it blew up.
All right. So just to repeat the question, he couldn't tell that the format changed immediately until after it was deserialized, and then things broke. So any ideas on best practices around data migration and serialization?
Sure, I can start, I guess. I mean, I think, so, using PDX is a good choice to start out with. I mean, I think, like basic things like adding and removing fields you should be able to do, but I think maybe your specific case had to do with JSON, like you're probably using the, I can't remember the name of it, but we have a converter straight from JSON into PDX, right? And I'm guessing maybe that the external data source changed the JSON schema, and then it basically turned into some different PDX. So I think one of the lessons learned that I've heard from people that are using JSON with GemFire is that you do have to sort of sanitize the JSON before it gets into Geode, because Geode, like we basically, the way we implemented the conversion from JSON into PDX is that we were really focused on wanting to give you like the smallest possible rows and the fastest possible performance, and so we actually do some crazy stuff to strip out the metadata from the data and all this stuff. And I think because of that, it doesn't work for completely all kinds of JSON data, like especially if like each, I don't know if this is your case, but like if each object has different fields or something, it doesn't work quite as well. So I guess, I mean, my best advice would probably be to like sanitize the JSON before it gets to Geode. As far as like if you're already in that situation, you know, you can access PDX in sort of a reflection style, right? So you can go and you should hopefully at least be able to get a PDX instance and say what its fields are, and then you'd have to do some translation after the fact if you're trying to take care of the data that you already had, I think. But I think sanitizing it before it gets there is the ultimate solution. So.
I second that, and the other problem you might also run into is proliferation of PDX types. So if each of your JSON document tends to be different, then we end up creating PDX type for each new structure that we see, and if that could easily go into tens of thousands of or even hundreds of thousands of different PDX types, right? And so underneath the covers, PDX types is just a replicated metadata region where all that is kept, and so you may end up in trouble down the road. So sanitize your JSON is really the best practice.
Cool. Thanks for that question. Let's move on to another one. Someone else have a hand they want to raise? Okay, over here. Go ahead. Excellent question. So let me repeat this for everyone. The question is about defining configuration parameters for regions and other structures in Geode, and being able to change those dynamically on the fly so that I don't have to restart either the cluster or individual nodes to pick up the new configuration. Got it? Okay. Anyone want to tackle this question?
Right. So as far as the changing of the TTL goes, right? There is already an alter region command that you can go in and change your TTL, and it already should work on the fly. Regarding adding the user, so if there you're referring to implementing the security manager, and then depends upon what your particular implementation of the security manager is, right? So if you write up the security manager in a way that it is either fetching the user details from LDAP or even a file on disk or what have you, right? So if the security manager is able to refresh that information often, then you should be off in the clear.
Yeah, because I feel like, maybe you can talk about the Security Manager API, but like we give you an interface where you can say, we just say somebody is trying to do a write on this region, right? And then your implementation of that could say yes or no. So I think maybe it should be doable, but again, it all depends on the implementation because, so that'd be my thought. Cool. I think as far as like other settings, as far as the other settings, yeah, I mean, expiration, like you said, that should be configured on the fly. I think we are pushing to get more and more stuff modifiable while the system is still running. Like, I know that particular case might be handled. I think there's probably still some settings that are harder to change, but that's something that I think we're definitely working on and making better.
Yeah, I think I've heard of a number of conversations where people are discussing what does an agile workflow look like with GemFire, where I'm writing a test, and then I'm running that test, it's failing, then I implement the code or the configuration behind that, and I want to make that cycle as fast and happy as possible. And I think if you hit some sessions later in the week, perhaps John Bloom might have some ideas around testing that might be interesting to you as well.
And so what goes a long way towards that is not having a singleton. I guess not having GemFire as a static singleton thing. And we're working towards trying to get rid of that as well.
Excellent. Question down front.
Start, I guess. Or if you, I feel your pain on that one. I guess first of all, I think that we added that read serialized flag, but I think we really should have made it more configurable. Like even in my mind, maybe down to the API about I'm this particular call I want to use read serialized, and this other piece of code I want it to not be read serialized. So that's something that I definitely would like to do. I'm not sure where that is on the roadmap.
And even changing that thing on the fly, right? Because right now it has to be set when your locator is up. That's when you go in and set that flag before starting on any of the servers. And that's a big pain point as well. So yes, we agree.
Okay, and the black NK.
Hello all. So we are using GemFire 828 right now, and we are planning to migrate to Geode, right? So one of the bigger things that we are looking for is off-the-heap memory, right? So can you talk about that, and how does it help, and what does it do for us?
Karen, do you want to?
I didn't hear what it was.
I'm sorry, let me repeat the question. The question is about, tell us about off-heap memory and what is it good for? When do I want to use it? Are there any caveats?
Absolutely right.
Okay. Karen, do you want to start? This is an interesting space we can explore a lot. So what is off-heap memory? Let's start there.
Not on heap. Thank you very much. Off-heap is a space that is not garbage collected. Yes?
Yep.
Got it. That's good. I
All
got
right.
us started.
Got it started. Sure. Jianxia, do you have any
so
thoughts?
for heap, so we're doing our own memory management, so we don't go through this on heap garbage collections. So we divide the heap memory into blobs with different size up to 2 gig, right? And then with GemFire Geode would handle this memory management for the applications, but I don't use that much, so maybe you can contribute.
Can we ask the audience, is anybody here using off-heap already? Yay!
Yay, awesome.
All right.
So touching back upon what you can get really, right? So what you can get is much smaller heaps, but then much bigger off heaps. And so that's where all your values will be stored. Your keys will still all be on heap. Just because your heap is now a whole lot smaller, you'll see a whole lot less GC activity from your conc sweep. And we've run some perf benchmarks, and we have consistently seen greater throughput when you're using off-heap. just because the concurrent threads, they do these incremental pauses nevertheless, which end up killing performance. So you should be able to see much better performance. One thing you need to be aware of is using queries. So yes, your queries. Right, so range indexes are actually not supported at the moment with off-heap memory, right? So it's going to be, I guess, we haven't come to a clean way of optimizing the performance for range indexes and indexing them, and still make the whole thing efficient.
Yeah, so I think the use case for off-heap is really going to depend upon your access patterns, how you want to get the data out of the cache. One of the big considerations we've talked about is GC. So you can size your heap to, as much as possible, avoid GCs, so more of your CPU is focused on your application and not on collecting garbage. I think the other aspect here is it gives us an opportunity to explore some really interesting optimizations where, as future work, we can do things like zero copy from network buffers directly into the memory space we control, rather than going through multiple object cycles inside the JVM. So we're not there yet, but there's some really interesting stuff around performance, I think, there. So the comment was, can you use expiry with off-heap memory? Does anyone know the answer to that?
I don't know off the top of my head, no.
We'd have to look at the docs.
Yeah. Check the code. Okay.
Okay, docs say don't use it, so I believe them.
Maybe we just, are not at that point, but I don't see any technical reason why supporting that with off-heap should be a problem. You could apply that same argument if you're destroying entries also, right? That's also removing values from off-heap, and that is supported. So we already have compaction support in our off-heap code, so that really shouldn't be a problem.
Awesome, we've got some great questions going. Who else has one? All right, so now the panelists are going to get into it because we're going to talk about gfish versus config XML. Which one should I use? When should I use it? Karen.
GFish.
Why? Yeah. Tell me why.
Because it's integrated with the cluster configuration, and it'll get things right. Because we're human, and we tend to mess up our cache.xml files, which has ramifications for when you bring down, bring back up clusters, restart, things like that.
So, Jianxia, you've been working on some areas that use cache config XML. Why did you use that?
So what we recommend is that if we either use cache XML completely without using gfish to configure it, or just use gfish only, not using the cache XML, just one or the other, not combine both. Otherwise, it would be something that's not predictable. So I would suggest using gfish too. So it's easier to configure, and also, as Karen mentioned, use the cluster configuration, which allows you to possess your configuration to the geolocator. And also, this configuration will be distributed to the other GemFire members, GeoM members.
Swapnil, do you agree with the other panel members?
Yeah.
Uh-oh, I think Dan's raising an objection here.
I mean, I think totally. I think cluster configuration is the way that we're going. Like, I think that's a way. It gives us more. It gives us the ability to automate more things, right? By you saying this is how I want my region to be defined everywhere. I think the one thing I would like to plug, since we're at SpringOne, is that if you go to John Blum's talks later this week, there's some cool stuff about using annotations to configure Geode. So he's got some really neat stuff, which is yet a third option, but it could be really nice, and especially like for client-side configuration. I think like if you're using Spring, like yeah, I think that's a great way to go. So
Cool. That said, there are probably some caveats. There are certain gfish limitations that aren't fully on par with config XML yet. Also, if Charlie Black says something, you should do what he says. So that's all I got. Okay, another question from the audience. Here we go.
So I've got a question about debugging and optimizing queries. So when we're doing basically exploratory queries to see like how can we get the data out the most efficiently and so on, sometimes we run into queries that consume all of our CPU and we basically have to wait for the cluster to get healthy again. And sometimes we see 500 millisecond responses and 50 milliseconds just by moving some query parameters around, right? Is there a way for us to connect to some JMX or whatever and just get that data out in a more, less exploratory way?
Excellent question. So the question is, when I'm in development, writing some queries, I see lots of different performance. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not good, and I want the GemFire, I want Geode statistics to tell me when I wrote the right query and when I can improve it. And what tools do we have available? Any thoughts?
I mean, I can give you a few tools that are out there. I think we do have stats on queries. So I know that at least in VSD you can get stats on like how long my queries are taking. I'm not actually sure if those are in the JMX layer or not, but you should be able to get it through VSD. The other thing we have is there's a trace option you can pass to your queries, so you can see like, is my query using an index? Which index is it using? How long did it take? So that is a good option to be looking at what's going on with queries. I would love to have something where I could see like, yeah, what are my currently running queries, or what are my most expensive queries over time? But I don't think, as far as I know, we don't have something exactly like that.
Yeah, I think another thought on this is GemFire scales horizontally, so as you add more nodes, you add more data. And in the absence of indexes, we do full table scan, and that means not just on one node, but on every single node that's hosting your data. So maybe something to watch out for if you're not expecting that.
So, and again, going back to your CPU observation, I guess, right? So, what we have with our OQL engine is it pays attention to the heap, and if the query is generating a lot of temporary data and ends up, above the eviction or the critical threshold, right? We cancel that query. What we have not done is pay attention to other resources for the query. So CPU would be a absolutely nice resource that we could add so that the query performance can take a look at CPU, and if CPU is hotter than a certain percentage, then maybe we kill the query or something of that sort. So.
I guess what I want to see really is if I were running these on SQL, I would just trace what's actually being run on SQL. So I see if I'm running a set, does it do select star by on the first value and then create a second query for the second value, or does it somehow concatenate all of that? Currently, there is no way that I know of to see what GemFire is actually running and what query is actually being produced, especially if I'm using an inner select or an inner set. Sometimes it feels like it's running that select for each row in the data set. That is obviously quite bad, right? So if there's a way to see that, I would be very happy.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely start with that trace option. It's not quite as nice as things I've seen where you're not going to get like a nice little tree of like, here's my whole execution tree for this query, but it will at least tell you, am I using these indexes? It's basically like part of your query string. You pass a flag, or I think there's also a property to turn it on for the whole system. I can find it after this. I can't remember off the top of my head. But I would probably start with there. That's probably the closest, I think, to what you have. But I think it's something we should probably build out better. Yeah.
Excellent. So we heard earlier that Geode supports transactions, and I solicited some questions from the internet, and one of the questions was really specific about transactions. I wanted to make sure we hit it today. So the question is, does Geode support transactions on distributed data? Will it? And I'm going to add, should it? Who wants to tackle this one?
So I guess I can start. So at the moment, Geode does not work on distributed data. You have to collocate your data and then transact on the collocated data piece. With regards to distributed, right? So collocating your data has certain advantages, right? So you're going to get the most bang for your buck because there is the least amount of coordination that has to be done with the various nodes of the distributed system. So that is a very useful optimization that we have. Having said that, there are many use cases that cannot really model their data to be collocated. And for those, I think it is very important for us to support full distributed transactions as well. What I, however, do think is we should not lose track of the optimization that we have done. So, if we can, if the data is collocated, then we should absolutely go ahead and use the most optimistic implementation of transaction. If the data is not, however, then you'll get a more degraded performance, but your transaction would still succeed. And I believe we should actually get that implemented.
Jianxia, what's your opinion on this topic?
And make sure when you're running transactions on the different regions, make sure your region data are collocated. That's a requirement. And also this is for a performance reason. Right?
Yeah. Karen, do you agree?
That you need your data collocated, yes. I guess I'd just like to add that when you're designing a system with transactions and you're using Geode as your cache, you want to think very carefully about what it is you're doing, why you're doing it, and design your regions well.
I'm so glad you brought that idea up because Geode isn't a relational database. Just like with every other NoSQL data store, you make trade-offs for other qualities. Performance we've mentioned a lot. For 99% of your transactions, you want them to be super fast. You don't want to do two-phase commit over the network with XA writing to disk so you can recover that transaction. But Swapnil says, that 1%, we got to have it for. So I guess I can see both sides. How's that for a moderator?
So we are at SpringOne, right? And one of Spring's mantra is, common things should be simple, but difficult things should be possible. So, in line with that.
Okay, there we go. Let's see, there was a question over here. The question was, is that on the Geode roadmap?
It is Geode 18, so it's one of the very first requests on the Geode.
The Jira ticket.
Yeah,
the Jira ticket.
Yeah.
Not the version that it's kind of, yeah.
Oh, yes, sorry, yes. I did not mean Geode 18.0. I meant Geode 18, the tracker issue. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Dan. I cannot really comment on, if and when, but if you look at that issue, right, there are already a bunch of commits that have gone against that particular Jira. There is a branch, I believe, which has a semblance of an implementation. So we as a community just need to work on it more and clean it up and merge it back to develop.
Isn't that a perfect plug for if you really want it, how about joining the community and helping out the community to implement distributed transactions?
Cool. All right, we have time for one more question.
It's kind of a tricky, but we as a company, right, we're using a lot of GemFire features, but we collect a lot of geospatial data also. And my question is around how do I get that data back, like keywords, and how do I create indexes so that my geospatial queries are faster within Geo? Is there any plan to work on that? I know for sure that does not exist right now, but is there any plan to do that?
The question is about geospatial and how to optimize Geode to retrieve geospatially oriented data. Do you have any ideas?
Well, I have a couple of thoughts. I mean, so I know that I've seen some people build actual geospatial indexes on top of the Geode's regular indexes. I'm trying to think if it was actually
Charlie Black.
maybe yeah, it was Charlie. I was going to say, I swear it's somebody, one of the guys that you're having talking today. There we go. So he would be a good person to talk to. Yeah. So we're talking about geospatial queries. Yeah. So remember that face. The other thing that you could try, which actually I did a little bit of experimenting with, and I'd love if somebody were to play with this more. So with our Lucene index support, Lucene actually supports geospatial indexes. So you should actually be able to use the Lucene spatial APIs on top of our Lucene indexes and actually build a geospatial index that's stored in Geode that way. Haven't really tested scaling that out or whatever, so probably what Charlie has done is a better place to start, but it'd be interesting to play with anyway. But, yeah.
Excellent. I think we're almost out of time, so we're going to do lightning round, one sentence each. If you could change one thing about Geode, what would it be? Go.
Backward compatibility. I want to break it. Sorry.
Okay, Jianxia.
I want to make Geode easier to configure and easier to use.
Dan, one thing to change.
I want to change region to something that makes more sense, like map, or the name, just the name.
Awesome. Swapnil.
I would have liked to open source it way back in 2008 or 9.
All right, a time machine for Geode. With that, thank you so much, and please find us. We will be around all week. We'll love to answer more questions. Thanks again.